Hello, my friends, and welcome once again to another installment of Know Before You Go, our online video series to help you best prepare for Sunday's liturgies. What we try to do in these video series is really to allow you to better appreciate the scriptures that are going to be presented, proclaimed, and then preached upon. This weekend we have really what I'd call an embarrassment of riches, an excess of God's gifts to us, all revolving in those scriptures around the timeless and inexhaustible theme of faith. Now, what do we mean by faith? Probably the most famous definition of faith, one we know as well as probably the Pledge of Allegiance and all could roll right off our tongues, is the one from the letter to the Hebrews. That being faith as the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not yet seen. Still very powerful as we speak of it. But how did faith begin? How did we understand it? Faith really was, in the Old Testament, built upon the whole experience of the Israelites in the Exodus, that whole journey from slavery to liberation, and faith being understood as that rock-solid belief in a God who could be counted on, a God who heard his people's cry for liberation, their hope for freedom, and came forth to deliver them, was resolute, in fact, determined to deliver them. And then we see faith develop further, the notion of it in the New Testament, really as the claim of the risen Christ on each one of us, to surrender our whole existence to him, and to know that we have a personal God who not only became one of us and took on our own skin, but through us experienced everything we could possibly experience and came out having conquered death. And as he is risen, so will we rise. That's the context, the definition and content of faith. So what do we have in this weekend's scriptures calling us to that rich sense of faith in a further development of our own understanding of faith? We have, in the words of the psalmist, that wonderful line, that wonderful prayer, the hand of the Lord feeds us. He answers all our needs. And we see that in the Old Testament first reading with Elisha being given 20 barley loaves and first fruits by a man who said, well, it's not going to be enough to feed all the people. But Elisha says, don't worry, go out, start feeding the people. It will take care of itself. There will be enough. In other words, our God always provides enough. With God, where there doesn't seem to be a way, we find a way. That's faith. And then in parallel, of course, the famous multiplication of loaves parable we see in the scriptures, in the gospel. And Jesus, knowing exactly what he's going to do, questioning the disciples as though, geez, I wonder how we're going to solve this problem. Is there enough food to eat? Meanwhile, knowing there isn't. But Andrew comes along and says, there are 5 barley loaves and 2 fishes. What could we do with that? And our Lord basically shows them through faith, through going beyond the limits of what they think is materially possible, that with God all things are possible. And we know how the story goes. There's more than enough. Again, where it didn't seem possible, God feeds his people, gives them everything they could want, and there's still more than is left over. Why is this important? In our culture today, we so often have a scarcity mentality. There's not enough. I don't have enough. I need more. The church is always there to remind us through faith that we're never called to have more, but God is always calling us to be more, and that we can be satisfied knowing our God will provide for all that we need and will satisfy us. Again, as the psalmist says, the hand of the Lord feeds us. He answers all our needs. In that one phrase, we come to a summary of the whole gospel in that first reading, the whole message of this weekend. So let us trust that. And let us trust that faith And that simple definition that we've known by heart since childhood is the one we can still best count on, and the one we should end every day with as the prayer on our lips that most pleases our Lord. Faith, the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not yet seen. It is enough.